Good evening, and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Lewis McGlynn. First up tonight, our Ukraine update on day 460 of the Russian invasion. Ukraine reported that Russia launched up to 40 cruise missiles and about 35 drones overnight. Air defences claim to have shot down 37 missiles and 29 Shahed drones. At least one person has been hospitalised after a wave of explosions were heard in Kiev early this morning. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko said that the person had been in the Podolinsky district in the north of the city. The local authority reported that the roof of a two-storey building caught fire in the district as a result of the falling debris, but that the fire was contained. An unspecified military target in the western Khmelnytskyi region was struck, with the regional governor reporting that 5 aircrafts were disabled and that a fire had broken out in a fuel warehouse. In Odessa, fragments of a downed kamikaze drone hit the port infrastructure, causing a fire, and rockets and drones were shot down over Lviv, Kirovohrad, Poltava, and Mykolaiv regions. Serhiy Popko, the head of Kiev's military administration, said that Russia was trying to exhaust the country's air defences with the increased attacks. In its latest analysis of the conflict, US think tank, the Institute for the Study of War, has written that the Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin has indirectly undermined Russian President Vladimir Putin's authority and regime again. Foreign investors who left Russia after selling their businesses there between March of 2022 and March 2023 withdrew about $36 billion from the country, according to analysis of data from the central bank. The death toll from a Russian missile attack on a medical facility in Dnipro on Friday has risen from 2 to 4 people, according to the region's governor. Thousands of children have been kidnapped and taken to Russia since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February last year. According to the Ukrainian government, 16,226 children have been deported to Russia, of whom 10,513 have been located, and more than 300 have been returned. There are fears, however, that the numbers of missing could be an underestimate. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko has said that if any other country wants to join a Russia-Belarus union, there could be nuclear weapons for everyone. Russia's Interior Ministry has put US Senator Lindsey Graham on a wanted list, Russian news agency TASS has reported. Russia said its air defense systems destroyed several drones as they approached the Ilsky oil refinery in the Krasnodar region near the Black Sea on Sunday. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed a panel to investigate US allegations that a Russian ship collected weapons from a naval base near Cape Town last year. Moving on to our top story tonight. In an interview with The Guardian, the First Minister of Wales has said that the UK could break apart unless it is rebuilt as a solidarity union. Mark Drakeford said that social and political bonds across the UK have come under sustained assault for 40 years through the reigns of Margaret Thatcher as well as post-Brexit. Mr. Drakeford said that in order to persuade people in all parts of the UK that their futures lie together within a restructured United Kingdom, we have to recreate a solidarity union. The Welsh First Minister said that rebuilding a solidarity union would mean rebuilding a safety net for those sick and out of work, as well as protecting the environment and consumer and trade union rights. He continued, "We have to rebuild the safety net so you know that your membership of the United Kingdom entitles you to that collective security that it represents." The First Minister went on to say that if you move from Scotland to Wales, you should take those fundamental rights with you as part of your citizenship, but said that said rights have all but been progressively eroded by Tory governments, particularly since 1979. Mr. Drakeford added that the long years of neoliberalism have been a sustained assault on the notion that citizenship means rights, and the next Labour government needs to rebuild those rights, to do it explicitly and say to people, this is what you get, that's why it's worth belonging to the UK. Mark Drakeford is one of the Labour Party's most prominent advocates for the wholesale reform of the UK, arguing it is the most credible response to the desire for independence in Scotland. The First Minister is due to speak on the 1st of June at a conference hosted by Gordon Brown on reforming the UK. The Labour and Conservative parties opposed devolution of employment law and unemployment benefits to Scotland under the Smith Commission, which was set up to transfer additional powers to Scotland following the 2014 independence referendum. Women are more than twice as likely as men to miss out on being automatically put into a workplace pension, according to a recent report by the Trades Union Congress. The TUC said its study suggested that more than 1 in 10 women were in jobs where their employers did not have to enter them into a workplace pension, compared with fewer than 1 in 20 men. About 1.4 million women earn less than the £10,000 threshold that requires their employers automatically to enrol them into a pension, according to the TUC. This means that they are potentially missing out on an occupational pension. Northern Ireland, the West Midlands, and Wales are areas with the highest proportion of female employees who do not qualify for auto-enrolment, according to the study. The Prospect Union has calculated that the income gap between men and women in retirement is now 40.5%, more than twice the level of the gender pay gap. Paul Nowak, the TUC's General Secretary, said, "We need to fix our pension system so that all women can benefit from a decent income in retirement. But many are missing out on having any sort of occupational pension at all. Unless ministers act now, more women will be consigned to poverty in retirement." One driver of the gender pension's income gap is the unequal division of caring responsibilities, the TUC said, which means women are much more likely to take time out of work or work part-time to look after children. That makes it harder to build up a workplace pension. Other causes include the gender pay gap and historical differences in national insurance that have left women with lower state pensions on average, the TUC said. The TUC wants the government to introduce a statutory requirement for ministers to report on the gender pension gap, along with an action plan on how to tackle the gap. It also wants pension auto-enrolment to be improved so that it works for people in low-paid or part-time jobs by removing the £10,000 earning threshold so that employers must opt all workers into a workplace pension, scrapping the lower earnings limit so that contributions are calculated from the first pound of earnings, and setting out a timetable to increase statutory minimum employer contributions from 3%. Police Scotland is rolling out an award-winning scheme aimed at ensuring officers are better equipped to find children and young people earlier whenever they are reported missing. The Philomena Protocol, which is named after the patron saint of babies, infants and youths, was the first of its kind in the UK after being introduced by Durham Constabulary in January of 2019. The protocol is primarily targeted towards children and young people living in care facilities and foster homes, and encourages carers, staff, families and friends to compile a standardised form of useful information which could be used in the event of a young person going missing. The type of information on the form will include interests, places of significance, friends and trusted people. These details will be used to ensure that police can establish the whereabouts of a missing child more speedily. The Philomena Protocol has been developed following the success and learning from the Herbert Protocol, an initiative to support adults who are at risk of going missing. From Monday the 29th of May 2023, Police Scotland's 13 territorial divisions will begin utilising the Philomena Protocol. Inspector Alistair Patterson from Police Scotland's Partnerships, Preventions and Community Wellbeing Unit said, "Whenever a child or young person is reported missing, time is of the essence when trying to find them, and often the first part of an investigation is spent obtaining a variety of pertinent information. As part of the Philomena Protocol, this information will now be readily available within the standardised form, and this may prove vital in quickly locating any youth subject to a missing person investigation. While there is an onus on parents, guardians and carers of children to ensure this information is accurate and up to date, the young person whom the form relates to can and should also contribute. This may help them understand how important their safety is and the level of police resource that is used whenever they are reported missing, not to mention the distress it can cause for their loved ones and caregivers." Uganda's president, Yoweri Museveni, has signed into law the world's harshest anti-LGBTQ plus bill, which allows the death penalty for homosexual acts. The move immediately drew widespread international outrage, as well as condemnation from many Ugandans. Early today, the Speaker of the Ugandan Parliament, Anita Among, released a statement on social media confirming Museveni had assented to the law first passed by MPs in March. It imposes the death penalty or life imprisonment for certain same-sex acts, up to 20 years in prison for recruitment, promotion and funding of same-sex activities, and anyone convicted of attempted aggravated homosexuality faces a 14-year sentence. The bill, described by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, as shocking and discriminatory, was passed by all but 2 of the 389 MPs on the 21st of March. Museveni had 30 days to either sign the legislation into law, return it to Parliament for revisions, or veto it. He sent it back to MPs in April with a request for reconsideration. The bill would have still became law without the President's assent if he returned it a second time. There has been strong condemnation of Museveni. A statement from the UN read, "We are appalled that the draconian and discriminatory anti-gay bill is now law. It is a recipe for systemic violations of the rights of LGBT people and the wider population. It conflicts with the Constitution and international treaties and requires urgent judicial review." In a joint statement, the heads of the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, UNAIDS, and the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief reacted with deep concern and said progress on tackling AIDS and HIV was now in grave jeopardy. The stigma and discrimination associated with the passage of the Act has already led to reduced access to prevention as well as treatment services. Trust, confidentiality, and stigma-free engagement are essential for anyone seeking healthcare, said the statement. LGBTQI+ people in Uganda increasingly fear for their safety and security, and people are being discouraged from seeking vital health services for fear of attack and punishment and further marginalisation, added to the statement, signed by Peter Sands, Winnie Byanyimana, and John Nyeksagong. Edna Nsima, an editor and social critic, said, "We should all be concerned that our collective homophobia as a country has, once again, culminated in the state signing a permission slip for hate and dehumanization." President Biden has said a bipartisan deal to raise the $31.4 trillion US debt ceiling and avoid a default is ready to move to Congress and urged lawmakers to pass the agreement he struck with Kevin McCarthy. "This is a deal that's good news for the people, the American people," the president said at the White House on Sunday night after a call with McCarthy to put the final touches to a tentative deal struck the previous day. "It takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery," he said. President Biden said that he strongly urged both chambers to pass that agreement, adding that he believed the House Speaker negotiated in good faith and expected him to have the necessary votes for the 99-page bill to pass. Asian shares and US stock futures rose on Monday, buoyed by the news of an agreement. By this morning, US lawmakers had been presented with the details of the deal with the aim of putting a bill to a vote as early as Wednesday in the House, followed by the Senate later in this weekend, and getting it passed before 5th of June. Thus avoiding a catastrophic and unprecedented default. Once the bill reaches the Senate, where Democrats have the majority, the pace of action will largely depend on whether any senators try to hold up the bill, possibly with amendment votes. That could tie up the legislation for a few days. Republicans control the House by 222 to 213, while Democrats control the Senate by 51 to 49. These margins mean that moderates from both sides will have to support the bill, as any compromise will almost definitely lose the support of the far left and far right wings of each party. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York warned on Sunday that, due to the time it may take to process the legislation in the Senate without cooperation, senators should prepare for potential Friday and weekend votes. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell applauded the agreement and called on the Senate to act swiftly to pass it without unnecessary delay once it has gone through the House. Today's agreement makes urgent progress towards preserving our nation's full faith and credit and a much-needed step towards getting its financial house in order, he said. Earlier, Biden told reporters when arriving back at the White House after attending the high school graduation of one of his granddaughters in Delaware that there was no sticking points left between him and McCarthy. When asked if he was confident the deal would be voted through Congress and reach his desk, he replied, yes. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the US could default on its debt obligations by 5th of June if lawmakers do not act in time to raise the federal debt ceiling. A default would shake financial markets and send the US into a deep recession. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has extended his 2 decades in power, securing victory over his rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu after an unprecedented presidential runoff election in a vote that reflected Turkey's stark and persistent political polarisation. With 99.43% of the vote counted, Turkey's Supreme Election Authority announced late on Sunday that Erdogan had won 52.14% of the votes, while his opponent received 47.86%. With a gap of more than 2 million votes between candidates, the votes yet to be counted would not change the result, said Ahmet Yener, the head of the election board. Even before the result was called, a triumphant Erdogan stood on top of a bus near his residence in Istanbul to once again sing a campaign song to his adherents and pronounce his victory. Both candidates encouraged their supporters to show up and vote in a runoff election where the turnout was high. The victory for Turkey's longest-serving leader affords him both another term in office as president and an endorsement of his populist style of politics after he emerged victorious in an election that challenged his rule. The Turkish leader has spent 2 decades reshaping the country in his own image, concentrating power on his office, detaining opponents, and instituting increasingly unorthodox economic policies. Despite this, he gained support in many of the areas of Turkey worst hit by the country's financial troubles, as well as areas levelled in twin deadly earthquakes that killed more than 50,000 people in southeast Turkey. The Turkish president went on to boast of Turkey's economic independence despite a financial crisis linked to his policies, one sparking a rising cost of living crisis among his citizens. Erdogan entered the second round in the lead after a first-round race where he received 49.5% of the overall vote, compared with Kılıçdaroğlu's 44.5%. While his AKP, along with their nationalist coalition partners, won a majority in parliament. The opposition had succeeded in forcing Erdogan into a runoff vote, an unprecedented event in the presidential system that Erdogan introduced, but was ultimately unable to cinch the majority of votes needed to secure his victory. Kılıçdaroğlu and his opposition coalition campaigned on the promise of returning Turkey to parliamentary democracy, pledging to reverse many of the changes that would have marked Erdogan's 2 decades of rule, including concentrating power around his office and jailing his opponents. After a setback for the campaign in the first-round vote, Kılıçdaroğlu and the CHP encouraged their supporters to turn out a second time amid heightened concern among the opposition concerning the security of the vote and the count. CHP officials raised concerns that examples of violence towards their election observers in the southeast city of Şanlıurfa and Istanbul, where one electoral observer suffered broken ribs, amounted to interference in the voting process. Consumers buying Mars bars at Tesco in the coming days will notice a change. The chocolate bar's usual plastic wrapper has been swapped for a more environmentally friendly paper one. Confectionery maker Mars is trialling recyclable paper packaging for a limited time, with the bars available at 500 Tesco stores from today. The company is looking to explore different types of packaging and how these work in everyday life, and said that it would use the feedback to inform future packaging pilots. Mars bars' current plastic wrappers cannot be recycled, and as is the case with several other kinds of food packaging. Crisps, chocolate, and cheese have traditionally been regarded as the worst foods for packaging recyclability, and big brands have previously come under pressure from customers and campaigners to do more to swap their wrappers to help the environment. Mars is not the first confectionery firm to try changing from the traditional wrapping to something a bit more environmentally friendly. It follows the move by Quality Street to ditch its traditional foil and plastic wrappers for recyclable paper before last Christmas. The change by Nestle marked the end of shiny plastic wrappers for the first time since the launch of Quality Street in 1936, in favour of a kind of packaging collected by most local authorities for 9 of its 11 sweet varieties. The Orange Crunch and Green Triangle remained in their existing foil wrappers, as these were not wrapped in a layer of plastic. At the same time, Nestle also announced it was switching Kit Kat wrappers to 80% recycled plastic, allowing them to be recycled at supermarkets across the UK or put in household recycling in Ireland. Mars said it will be exploring different types of alternative packaging solutions for its confectionery products. In a pioneering project, and the first of its kind in the UK, Scottish Water will harness hydropower from wastewater. Construction of this innovative scheme is underway and involves the installation of a hydro turbine at Hamilton Wastewater Treatment Works in South Lanarkshire. The scheme is being led by Scottish Water's commercial subsidiary, Scottish Water Horizons, and is expected to generate 0.42 gigawatts of green electricity each year, the equivalent of boiling around 1,800,000 kettles a year, and offset 13% of the treatment works' annual electricity demand. It will be the first prefabricated hydro scheme to be installed mid-process at a wastewater treatment works in the UK, with wastewater flowing through a hydroelectric generator within the pipeline of the plant. The hydro turbine is anticipated to cut carbon emissions by around 64 tonnes each year, the same amount as a passenger jet flying from Glasgow to Sydney, Australia 13 times. Neil Beaumont, Horizon's Hydro Energy Team lead, said, "Scottish Water has a vast array of land, property and operational assets that offer enormous potential when it comes to renewables. We need to be open to fresh ideas and bold in our delivery when it comes to achieving our green energy ambitions." Until recently, all previous hydro efforts have concentrated on harnessing energy from our water assets. Now we're looking at more creative ways to generate energy and lower our carbon emissions. By adopting a non-traditional approach, such as that at Hamilton Treatment Works, we can identify opportunities to further optimise generation and tap into significant potential across Scotland. Well, that's it for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated, and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a new target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. Good night, and thank you for watching.